Twitter also allows you create your profile, and that's what one individual did when he set up an account claiming to be an IMF official in Ireland during the bailout negotiations. He attracted a lot of attention when his satirical comments appeared, such as...
The top 3 state assets according to the Finance Department are 40 Shades of Green, 100,000 Welcomes and the Giant's Causeway.
Or...
The other state assets being offered to the EU are the crocks of gold leprechauns leave at the end of rainbows and the actual rainbows.
The fans of the tweets included a publishing company, and the venture ultimately ended in a book deal for the creator of the account. So the secret of Twitter is keep it witty and keep it snappy. You've only got 140 characters to get your message across.
And joining us in the studio now is Donal Conaty, the author of The €85 Billion Man. A very good morning to Donal. Many thanks for coming on. You had wanted to write a book for donkey's years.
I had, absolutely. I was always interested in writing and writing novels, and I have started several times, but I never got anywhere with it.
Now, you only started tweeting for 3 days.
Specifically, the IMF Dublin Diary, I only started tweeting for 3 days before the publisher came in. I have an online journal called The Mire, which I tweet the stories from it as well, so that's separate, and that has been going for longer.
And they just spotted the ones about the IMF, this fictitious one.
It caught a bit of attention, and I wouldn't say it was huge, but the people whose attention it caught were people who were in publishing and interested. Irish Publishing News reviewed it after 2 days as a way Twitter should be used. And then Y Books came in the following day and offered a publishing deal. So.
And how many tweets would you have been putting up for those first couple of days?
The first couple of days, there were a lot. There were maybe 15 or 16 a day, because it was so intense, as you can remember, back at the end of November when the IMF came in, and there was so much going on, and there was great appetite for it.
And did you have any followers? If you just started your Twitter account, you need followers.
People quickly came from the Mire, because I have about 1,000 followers on the Mire, and people quickly came from that. And then a few people, quite influential, said, you have to get onto this, you have to follow this. Now, like I said, it got up to 500 or 600, but it seemed to be all media people. It seemed to be.
And the timing obviously worked in your favour. Everyone was like, there was such a stir of cause about the IMF landing in town, and what way the deal was going to work out.
And there was so much rich material in the public arena anyway that I could just slightly tweak to my own advantage. There was so much going on.
Yeah, well, the book though was fiction.
Thinly disguised in places.
I want to ask you so many questions about it. First of all, tell us about Paddy, Enda Kenny's friend.
Paddy, if you can remember the Enda, shortly before the first Brussels summit, he said Paddy wants to know what the story is. He was talking very gung-ho about going over to Brussels and finding out what the story is for Paddy, which is us. We are the Paddys. And yet in my book, Paddy is actually his imaginary friend since childhood and his closest personal advisor, and the person who he celebrates winning elections with, because other Fine Gaelers don't celebrate with Enda in my book. So.
Right.
You also said about Enda Kenny, when you're getting the briefing, your fictitious character in the book, sort of presented like it's sort of a black ops, AJ coming in on the plane at night.
Yes.
He's telling them all the key players in the Irish economy. And they've said about Enda Kenny, whenever the economy is mentioned, his handlers send him to the corner shop for ice cream.
Yes.
So he's taking a good swipe at a few of the main people there.
Everyone there. I mean, one of the things I'm most pleased with is because it happened in real time, it's based on real events. The election came up slightly before we thought it would, and the new government was only in, and it's very hard to satirise somebody who hasn't got a history of mistakes, whereas Fianna Fáil had a history of mistakes. It was easy to do. But I feel that it ended up even-handed. Everyone got a hard time, basically.
Mary Coughlin, Sweary Mary.
Yes, she gets in there. There's a sort of frisson between her and the IMF Dublin official there. They sort of get on.
And Dermot Ahern and Noel Dempsey, the guys that would deny your existence even if they met you at the airport.
Precisely so, yes. And they come across sort of like, well, guys with ADHD, basically. They don't have much of an attention span for what's going on.
Jackie Healy-Rae and the statue.
Yes, well, if you remember, they had to get the budget through. And of course, when you need to get something through in Ireland, a deal is done. And in my version of events, there is a statue of Jackie the Redeemer that has to be bigger than the one in Rio de Janeiro of Christ the Redeemer, and it has a platinum cap. And that is what got the budget swung.
You paint a very, let me say, jaundiced picture of our civil service, especially the Department of Finance. the IMF official, which is the central character of your book, having to bribe the security guard to get into the office in the morning. He turns up 10:30. There's no sign of any of the other civil servants in the office.
Yes, well, it's pure farce. I mean, I don't know anything about the Department of Finance, and I'd stress that this is pure fiction and it's absolute satire. Having said that, it was hard not to, reading the papers in the last 6 months, watching the news, it was hard not to think that they were satirists too. You know, they...
And it's not that you're a political journalist, that you were going down to government buildings every day, hanging out with the hacks. These were just stories that you saw on the news that you put a spin on yourself.
I put a spin on myself over I live in rural Sligo, and it's an old cowshed converted into an office, and I sit in there and dream them up. Yeah.
And the translation from those first few days of those Twitters, the fictitious satirical Twitters, into eventually becoming a book, did you say, well, maybe there might be something in this, there could be a character here I could sort of shape out of all this?
I think that the key character is Dermot Mulhern, who is the fictitious head honcho in the Department of Finance, and he's the rich comedic character, and he worked pretty much instantly, and once he worked, all of the others, if you're writing a book, it wrote it in 3 months, you don't necessarily know what's going to happen, but once he was working, they bounced off him, everyone else bounced off him, and that worked. When it started, I knew it was working. I knew it could be something. I didn't necessarily think a book. I thought maybe a comedy show. I wasn't sure. But they came in so quickly with the book idea that things moved from there.
And what's the reaction been from politicians?
They don't talk to me, but they never have. I don't know any of them. The reaction from members of the public are loving it. And people, remember, we've all lived through this. And it's maybe quite nice to have a laugh about it.
As you say, they all get a swipe, but it is an even swipe. They all get it.
It's even. I'd like to think it's not mean-minded. Yeah. I think it's funny with a big F, and it's not intended to be sniping.
And does it end with the book, the IMF Dublin Diaries?
Well, he's still going. He still tweets regularly now about what's going on.
He was left behind by AJ.
He was. Well, AJ sort of said, you have to hold their hands through this process. So he's there for the foreseeable future. In actual fact, the head honcho in finance, Dermot Mulhern, he ends up being Enda's closest personal advisor after Enda discovers, unfortunately, that Paddy didn't exist. So there's a future in him as well, possibly.
Yeah. All right, well, Donal, keep the tweets going.
Thank you.
And The Mire is your journal for anyone out there who...
That's right, themire.net, and it has a story every morning that is a spoof of the day's news.
Perfect. Well, listen, a pleasure to meet you. Congrats on the book, all from Twitter. It just shows you what you can do if you have a Twitter account.
Thank you very
much.
Well
done.
Thanks a lot.
Don't forget, if you've missed any of the morning's programme, you can catch it online at tv3.ie/The Morning Show.
On tomorrow's